Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the On the Mark Financial Forum and Podcast. I have a special guest today. I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Mark. My name is Morgan Lamphere, and I'm the president of Lauren Rose Senior Advisors. We provide sales and marketing consulting for different types of senior living providers all around the United States and Canada.
Sounds great. Well, I'm sure you're seeing a lot of things kind of shifting as we're getting into the baby boomer generation of those who are aging, and demand obviously is going to rise. We know that for sure. But what sort of trends are you seeing in your part of senior living?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to tell you that in every single community where we're working, we have waiting lists 17 miles long and that people are just banging down the doors to get in. I would say demand has increased, and I do think in many markets we are seeing some nice long waiting lists. But as new communities are looking to do expansions and they're increasing their vacancy rates, I'm seeing that there are still a pretty large number of senior adults that are age and income qualified to move into a senior living community, but are still opting to stay home, wait. I'm not ready yet. I just don't think this is the right time for me. Maybe someday. And we're hearing those obstacles continuing to do that. So it's
Yeah.
a continued, I don't know if struggle is the right word, but it's a continued challenge that our sales teams are seeing, that they have to continue to build those relationships in order to get people to say yes and opt into this and move into the community.
Yeah. And are you finding that the sales process, if you want to call it that, or just the decision-making process for seniors is longer than it was maybe in the past?
Definitely. In
Yeah.
some of my clients, certainly the residents themselves, the prospective residents, they're taking longer to make that decision. They're also coming where they really want to be more educated in the decision. So they're doing more research with all of the different competitors in the market. They're also exploring creative things like, what if I did just stay home? What if I linked up with my neighbor? Maybe my daughter could have a little mini house in the backyard. They're looking at all kinds of options for what they can do as they're aging. But the communities are also becoming more stringent in some cases, where they're becoming more stringent and making sure that there's certain health parameters that those residents are seeing. So it's kind of on both sides, where that process of from the inquiry to the actual move in, that can take some time.
Yeah, and I would imagine the longer they wait, the higher the likelihood is that some of them may not meet the medical requirements
Uh-huh.
to be able to move in.
That's our big struggle is even in one of the communities I'm thinking of now, the time that it even takes for the community to make a decision about them. That resident may have a health change. And so we've got to really be on top of it to make sure that people apply for this and they start the application process well in advance of ever having any kind of question about their health or the likelihood that they'd be able to get accepted into the community, because we just never know. I always think about my husband, unfortunately, just recently had a hospital stay. And I was walking up and down the halls of the hospital wondering, I wonder how many people actually planned to be here this week and how
Right.
many. This is just, it comes out of the blue and they're having to deal with a health crisis. So we know that that's the reality. And as we all get older, that's just the reality, that it increases that likelihood that there's going to be an unexpected health crisis. And just being able to get into a place where you've got that peace of mind that all of the different levels of care are taken care of is a big advantage as you're getting older.
Right. And can you explain to the group the types of communities that you usually work with and what's required to become a member of the club,
Yeah,
so to
well,
speak?
we're very fortunate at Lauren Rose. Our client base is anything from a standalone assisted living memory care rental community all the way to a full not-for-profit life plan community. And those communities, many people may know them as continuing care retirement communities, and they offer different types of contracts. Some are all inclusive contracts that provide a life care program, and then some contracts allow the resident to really pay as you go, as you need those additional services. For the life care, the life plan community, in order to be part of those communities, you have to have two requirements. One is you have to be medically qualified, And then the other is that you have to be financially qualified. So on the medical side, it's pretty straightforward. You have to be able to live independently.
Hmm.
And on the financial side, you typically have to have net worth assets that equal about 2 times the entrance fee that you're about to pay. So for some of our communities, that could be anywhere from a half a million to $2 million. And then also there's an income requirement as well. So there's those two qualifications in order to get in. And then once you're in, you're protected and have that care for the rest of your life.
Yeah, interesting. And yeah, I've never heard somebody express it the way that you did as far as the net worth requirement. Obviously,
Mhm.
we deal a lot with on the senior side of people contacting us about bridge loans in particular, because a lot of times seniors have a lot of that net worth tied up in their home.
Right.
Is that something that comes up often for your
Mhm.
salespeople?
All the time. Yep. When
Yeah,
we do our financial qualification, we look at the equity that someone would have in their home, and that would, of course, add to their net worth along with any investable assets that they have. So, those two figures, we add that together, understanding that most people are going to use some of the equity from their home to pay the entrance fee, the cost of their new home in a community. And the nice thing about life plan communities is that entrance fee and part of the monthly fees are considered prepaid medical expenses. So there's some nice tax advantages
right.
once they come into the community and they're paying those amounts.
Yeah. Well, and the tax benefits are also something we're talking about with the seniors often, because one thing that I think a lot of seniors and maybe sales professionals don't necessarily know is that how much capital gains tax a senior may be facing if they sell their home. So if they, for example, if they bought their home 40 years ago, which a lot of the baby boomer generation is like a buy and hold type of generation where they've lived in the same home for a very long time and obviously made a great decision to buy that home 40 years ago because it's worth a heck of a lot more now. But if they end up selling that home, they're going to potentially trigger just a massive capital gains tax or potentially massive capital gains tax. We came across a situation, unfortunately, we heard about it after the fact with another person in the senior living industry that we interviewed. And she was saying a 97-year-old woman and her family decided to sell the home. She probably maybe had, I don't know, a year or two left of life based on her medical status. And she had bought the home for like $50,000, sold it for $4 million. So we're talking about about $1 million check she had to write to the IRS. And so that's where some of our solutions come in. They're designed to avoid unnecessary taxes. So if we had been able to get in touch with that family, we may have been able to give them a loan to pay for the care in the meantime. And then when they sell the home, those taxes don't apply. There's something called a step up in basis, where after the person passes away, the value of the home that the IRS looks at to compare to the sale price is based on the date of death, not the date of when they purchased the home. And that can be a completely different number if they've owned it for 40 years, obviously a
Right.
much higher number.
Right.
So sometimes seniors aren't aware of these things, especially if they don't have a financial advisor, a tax advisor who's, guiding them through these decisions. So they might, take a bridge loan and then decide to sell the home as quickly as possible because they don't want to make the payments. But what they're not realizing is what they're actually making a much larger payment to the IRS. But it just depends. Every family situation is different. Some are looking, especially those looking in life plan communities, they're looking for, I would assume, knock on wood, a longer term stay than somebody who is at a later stage.
Absolutely.
And so
And
in
it's
some
a
cases it makes sense.
reality too. I mean, those residents moving into life plan communities are typically staying in the community 7 to 10 years. And the beautiful part about moving into the community, particularly if you're able to move in before you think you need it,
Hmm.
those residents have a far fewer likelihood of needing to move into assisted living or skilled nursing or memory care. And it's because they're living very healthy, active lives with a busy social calendar and a gym that they can go to, classes that they can take. They're keeping their minds active, they're eating right, and that's really a recipe for success and for not having to need assisted living or memory care or skilled nursing down the road. But the key is doing it sooner than you need it. But it's important for people to know that, because if you're looking at a community that does have a long waiting list, most of those residents are planning on living there for a really long time, and it's, that turnover of units is going to be pretty rare. So it's important to really plan in advance so that you're not left outside of that community if you really wanted to be there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've heard stories about some of them having a waiting list of 2 years or more. In some cases,
Hmm.
they're really in a desirable area or whatever. I'm sure there's lots of factors that go into why some have a longer waiting list than others, but sometimes
Definitely.
it can be several years. And yeah, it's a common theme when we're working with seniors is plan ahead. Talk to
Yes.
the right advisors. Don't wait till you're in some sort of family crisis mode where nobody makes good decisions when they're in crisis, or fully informed decisions, or takes the time to really like understand what they're deciding, what the implications are. So planning ahead is a really critical factor. But sometimes that unit that you've been on a waiting list for all of a sudden out of nowhere becomes available sooner rather than expected. So what sort of financial moves or things are you being asked by the consumer, the seniors? Like, how do they get through that? Like, what sort of products are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, the bridge loan offer is a great one. And anytime we have a customer who is liquidating that primary residence in order to pay the entrance fee to move in, especially if they have been in the home for longer than 20, 15, 20 years, that's usually a cue to us that the home probably needs some maintenance. It probably needs some staging, so that if they really want to sell the home at a top value and at a quick pace, they probably need to get out of the home before they put it on the market. So the bridge loan product's been a really successful one for many communities that I work with, that allows someone to pay the entrance fee, get settled into the community, really downsize the home, and then get all of the work that needs to be done in that home done while they're not having to live there in the middle of all of that construction and stress of having the roof replaced and things like that. So
Right.
that's been something that's been very helpful. I have some communities that have gotten creative and offered some rental agreements. So someone could move in and actually be renting the apartment while they're waiting for their house sale to be complete. And then once the house sale is complete, they convert to a life care or life plan contract by paying that entrance fee. That's a system that works very well as long as the community is flexible to be able to do that. The only risk there is you don't qualify for that life care contract until you pay the full entrance fee. So there could be a risk there that if someone had a health crisis in that interim time period, they may not qualify for life care at some point.
Right.
So that's just something that we're
Yeah.
always making sure we stay very clear with the residents of what those risks could be.
Well, you brought up a couple of great points, and you explained it as well as I do when we're talking to people about bridge loans. I'm very impressed, Morgan. Were you in the bridge loan industry before? Because you clearly understand all the logistics, but you're 100% right. The challenge is, or the need really is for seniors with bridge loans, because we do bridge loans for even like move up buyers who just had their first kid and they need another room or a backyard. But bridge loans for seniors are even more critical because there's really no option to sell your home first and then, go live at a friend's house and sleep on the couch for a few months until, your entry fee or your spot in line comes up. And sometimes that timeline, excuse me, is a moving target. So the logistics that allow you to be able to move into the community first, get settled, deal with all like you said, all the stuff, the decluttering, the carpets that may have been, the same, that are a little outdated, and any real estate agent will probably tell you, they want the home to not necessarily look lived in. They want it to look like a museum when they go to sell it. And it really does help sell it for top dollar. And oftentimes that helps offset the cost of bridge loans, because that's the biggest concern people have is bridge loans. It's sort of counterintuitive. You'd think that if you're taking a loan for a short period of time, which was typically a bridge loan is, that it would be less expensive. But it's actually the opposite. Because if you look at it from the lender's perspective, if they're only going to lend you whatever it is, $500,000, let's say, for a couple of months, it's not really worth them putting that $500,000 at risk if you didn't pay it back on time, or didn't make your payments on it. So it's actually higher risk and lower reward. So what often happens with bridge loans that lenders charge origination fees to make up for that short-term nature of those loans. But sometimes we run into situations where a community has been very generous, overly generous, in my opinion, where they're also offering like a promissory note to try to help them bridge the gap. But that puts a huge financial strain on the community because they're providing all the services, but they're not receiving any of the money yet until the senior sells the home. And because the senior's home may not be in a condition to sell quickly, it might take a while, and the community is kind of on the hook for that financial burden until the senior and their family are in a position to pay the entry fee. But have you seen, I would guess you would probably advise against it because financially it's really a drain on the community, but have you seen communities or heard of other communities that are actually offering that type of arrangement where they'll give a note, so to speak, like a loan, their own bridge
Yeah.
loan per se?
Gosh, you're giving me hives right now. I remember I had a community that I was working with in 2008. So we went through the Great Recession and
Mm,
struggled in sales for that community because we were selling $800,000, $900,000 entrance fees. And people couldn't sell their homes, and the perception was out there during that time that, oh, I've lost 400,000, 500,000 in value for my home, because perhaps in 2006 it was valued at 800,000, and now in 2008 that value came down during that recession time period. So there was a one couple I remember very distinctly that I begged and pleaded to our finance team. We really want to do a promissory note. This is the house is in a great market. It's in a really good neighborhood. We really think it's going to sell for top dollar. We think this is a great thing for us to do to bring this resident in. And we even knew the real estate agent. And I
mm,
said, I trust this real estate agent. They're going to give the resident really good guidance on how to get this house sold. And I called the real estate agent. I said, how are we feeling? We're still good because we did this promissory note and I got it approved. And she asked me, she said, you better come over here. And I
no,
walked into the house and I said, oh boy. And I actually spent a weekend sitting with this resident and going through closets and said, because they were absolutely wanting to cancel everything and back out. And I was going to be on the hook with that promissory note.
no,
And so I actually said, let's just get started with one closet. And boy, my Lord, if I counted five sweater sets from Talbot's, I think I counted 50 sweater sets from Talbot's. And I mean, we just went through, and I got an eyeful of what a real estate agent and what a downsizer has to go through. And truly, these folks, while they had a lot of stuff and they were really struggling with this decision, this is not a unique scenario. I would say
right,
this is 90% of our residents. That one, I just happened to have really fought for the promissory note, so I felt like I needed to go and help them with their just to get started with the downsizing and get through this, because
right,
that was only the first tip of the iceberg. They also still had hand painted their kitchen. All the kitchen border was a hand painted mural that they just absolutely did not want to get rid of, but we all knew they needed to get rid of it. And
right,
so we've all had those scenarios with couples and families that just, they really truly believe that this ultra customized house is going to be something that is going to command top dollar, when the
right,
reality is it's not that ultra customization. It's getting it to be a clean slate so that someone could see themselves living there. That's
right,
what's going to get the house to sell quickly. And having an older resident living in the home isn't going to work because it just is so counterintuitive to what that new buyer wants. But it's a
right,
tough message, I think, for a lot of people to swallow. When I think as we get older, and this is, is part of our developmental capacity. As we get older, we get more attached to our primary residence. And it's very, very hard emotionally to detach and really see it as this is just an asset. It's a way, it's a vehicle for me
Hmm.
to take this next step and take a new chapter in life, and turn that page. But that asset has to get liquidated. And that sounds easy for us because we understand, okay, it's a $500,000 house, we need to make that change. But for someone that's so emotionally tied to their 55 Talbot sweater sets and just doesn't want to let go of all of those things and doesn't want to
Right.
let go of that mural, it's really tough. It's tough. And
Yeah.
that's why you and I get paid the big bucks to help them through it and to hold their hand and build trust with them so that they feel safe and that they know it's a good decision to do.
Yeah, and it's also, we find a hard thing for seniors to make two big transitions at once. Even though it sounds like one transition, they're moving from probably a larger home into a smaller space. They're downsizing in space when they're moving into a community. And just the idea of moving into a community after living in a single family home or condo or whatever it is for years and years and years, their whole life, that's a big transition. And then also letting go of the emotional attachment to their home that they have memories in, and they have the the mural on the wall that they think is the greatest thing ever, the mural of the rooster in the kitchen or whatever it is on the farm that probably the next buyer won't appreciate as much as they might.
Mm-hmm.
Or people who have over improved the home and customized it to such a degree that they might not get that money back. And the risk for the community is also, sometimes sellers are not realistic about what their property is worth, especially in a downturn in the market like you mentioned. We're in a dynamic real estate market right now where it's kind of like could go either way. You're not really 100% sure what's going to happen with interest rates and all these other factors. And so it really, when you're a community that's offering those incentives, it's great for the consumer, but it could really backfire on the community. And that can have a very significant, I mean, if you're without $800,000, you probably got to make some adjustments to your budget if that falls through.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
where those
significant.
communities that have done that interim rental approach, I think that's a pretty good one because the contract, especially if it's a life plan community contract, that's going to really protect the community, knowing that at least they're going to have the cash flow of that monthly service fee once the person gets in. And there is, I think, a bigger comfort that that entrance fee is coming. And once the person's living in the community, they get a whole lot more comfortable with, oh, yeah, I'm not quite as attached to that rooster before. I'm now really focused on, I get to have dinner with these lovely ladies every night. And you know what? Now that I'm not seeing that view out of my back kitchen window every day, I'm actually enjoying this water view a little bit more. And,
Right.
there's more movement then, and then that becomes a little easier to get that house liquidated.
Yeah, for sure. And so we've been doing bridge loans for years and years and years. We started with the partnership with a big real estate firm that was in most states, and what we found was that seniors actually took advantage of this more than the average consumer who was maybe making a move up in space or in price. The example I used before where somebody has their first child or something like that, and they need more space. Those people were less likely to say yes to a bridge loan. When you have a senior who's downsizing or looking to go into a life plan community or something of that sort, and then the need to not have to figure out some interim living situation is stronger. And so we found that seniors are more likely to take advantage of these types of products. And I think, just to divulge into some of the details of our program, one of the things that makes it really unique is that nearly all of our bridge loan products, and we have lots of different ones that are right for different situations, they're not based on the prime rate. So a lot of the ones that have been sort of conventionally used in senior living in the past are prime based, and prime rate, we're doing this as of the beginning of March 2025. The prime rate's at 7.5%. So, and usually banks will add a margin on top of that
Mm-hmm.
to have, a little bit more revenue from those. So you're talking about rates that can be very high, double digits, things like that. Whereas some of the loans that we have are not based on prime, they're based more on consumer, like standard consumer mortgage rates, where the rates might be in the sixes. So, at least as of now, obviously rates are constantly moving. So, depending on when people are watching this episode, those numbers are subject to change. There's my official disclaimer for the regulators. But it's really flexible as far as the underwriting. Anytime you're lending to seniors, you can't have standard requirements. Banks are notoriously driven by income. And when you're a senior moving into a life plan community, I would imagine most are not running a business out of their second bedroom, right? They're
No, they don't. They've probably dispersed all their rental properties.
right.
They may have a pension that's becoming less and less
Hmm.
common these days. Most often, they're just relying on that income from their investments. And
Right.
they're not really interested in increasing that income because they don't want to pay any more taxes. So
Right.
when we do our financial qualifications, and that sounds like yours is similar, it's really on a holistic financial picture, looking at the total net worth assets, knowing that if somebody got into a dire situation and needed to liquidate something, that they've got the capability of doing that. But primarily they're going to keep their income from investments at a certain level, and hopefully not have to pay any more than they need to in taxes every year.
Right. And also looking at, this is where I think we're unique or maybe a little different and more holistic, as you said, is that we're also looking at the tax implications of not just what I talked about earlier about the step up in basis, but if you liquidate your investments, your investment account, for example, for a short term need, you may be triggering a capital gains tax that you could avoid by leveraging the home instead. Sometimes people look at the cost of bridge financing and say, well, I don't think it's for me. And then you say, well, what's the alternative? Is that you liquidate 800,000 from your investment accounts. Not only are you potentially triggering a taxable event there, but you also now, at least for the time being, don't have that money growing and compounding over time, which is the whole benefit of investing money, is the compounding interest and gains. So you kind of take that money out of producing income, which can help offset your regular expenses and your livelihood during retirement. So sometimes it's a tax play along with providing that solution, but oftentimes it makes more sense when you break down the numbers to pull equity from the home. Even though there's a cost associated with doing it, it's better than liquidating funds and creating a taxable event on your investment account. And some of our products we talked about how you have to have creative underwriting. So some of them just don't have traditional income requirements at all. If you have enough equity in your home and the home is in good shape and all that, there really aren't a lot of financial requirements. Some of them may be based on, the assets that you have rather than income. Maybe it's a combination of assets and income, but there's a lot of different flexible products that we have that I think are unique to this specific market, that we've applied from our regular bridge loan program for move up buyers to the senior market. And that creative underwriting is really the secret sauce as to how to make it work, because it's great to have all these products, but if your client base can't qualify for them, it doesn't really do you much
Yeah,
good. And seniors, like I said, notoriously are not still working and earning employment income,
right.
and so their income is lower than it was when they were working. But there are creative solutions to try to get people through that situation, and that's kind of where we come in with our sales team and trying to figure out what the best solution is and trying to find the best possible terms for clients. And we've found from our own research and talking to others in the space that our bridge loans are actually far less expensive than what people are used to. So that's why I thought it was going to be interesting for you and I to talk and get some good information out to our respective audiences about the different options for this.
What's usually your turnaround time? If we were to introduce you to someone who's got $1 million house that they
Hmm.
need to get a bridge loan on to maybe start, let's say pay an entrance fee of 900,000.
Hmm.
But what's usually the process? How long does it typically take for them to fund the bridge loan?
So it depends. There are some products that move a little faster than others. So if speed is the ultimate concern, then it's kind of a judgment call. We might give the senior both options and say, okay, this one we think we can close faster. Maybe it's a little more expensive. This one may take a little, an extra week, but it's going to cost you less. Which one do you think is relevant to your situation? But in general, I mean, some, depending on the amount, can be closed in less than 2 weeks. Others may take 25 days, 20 days, somewhere in there. 30 days would be generous, 30 days would be easy to get that done. So, depending on the senior situation, I would imagine when a senior, let's say they're coming off of a waiting list and they're given, I would imagine they'd be given some time frame to be able to
Yeah,
produce the
it's
funds, shorter the
usually
better.
60 days. So I think what often happens though is they have a home on the market maybe for 30 days. And we're watching the clock saying, okay, you've got another 30 days before you need to close. And often the resident may be kind of playing chicken where they're
Mhm.
waiting for that house to sell and close. We're saying we need you to close by this date, and they'll often say, well, oh well, I didn't close, and maybe we'll push off the closing date a little bit. But what we really need them to do is, okay, it's been 30 days, you have the house on the market for 30 days, any closing is going to take another 30 days. So even if you sell it tomorrow, you're still going to be in need of a bridge loan product. So let's just go
Right.
ahead and get that started today so that we've got it in time for our closing and that we don't lose any opportunity there for the resident to be able to move in.
Yeah. Well, and especially when you have a waiting list, because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't perform, they've got lots of other people who are ready to go that may or may not
Sure.
need bridge financing, because I'm sure not every resident's going to need it if they
Mm-hmm.
have the funds so that they
Yep.
can use from other
I'd much
sources.
prefer though, if we've already invested the money in that resident and invested all that time, I'd rather get them in because I know that
Sure.
they're interested in getting in, and let's help them be closed and start enjoying the life in the community for sure.
Yeah. Well, and like we were talking about before, planning ahead is the way to do it. You want to have those conversations
Absolutely.
about bridge financing before you're in a panic mode of, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I've run through, 45 of the 60 days they gave me. What am I going to have to
Mm-hmm.
do? Do I have to renegotiate? Do I have to, figure out how we're going to make this work? Am I going to be begging family members for money temporarily? While that rooster is still painted on the wall. Maybe it's time to invest a few bucks in the rooster being removed. But that's one of the other beautiful things about our bridge loan program is that the funds don't necessarily have to go like directly and only to the community. So they can be used to make the repairs that the real estate agent may be recommending, or it can go to cover just general living expenses for a period of time. You can have it include the payments for the bridge loan itself. So there's lots of different needs, but the interesting thing about our product is that it's very flexible. So we
Mm-hmm.
can certainly at closing direct the wire to be sent to the community to pay the entry fee, but there could also be another component of that that's given to the senior to cover ongoing expenses, repairs, decluttering, staging, whatever it is that they need to do in order to sell that property for top dollar.
Oh, that's
And
great.
sometimes that in and of itself covers the cost, because if you're selling your home for more, because you have this lump sum of money that you don't have to,
Mm-hmm.
not do the work to update the home, you're going to make it up that way
Absolutely.
usually. So, and your real estate agent will love you so much more if they're selling a finished home that will fly off the shelves, as opposed to having to convince people that they can, do their own renovation work.
You could change this carpet and repaint, and yeah, all of that
Right.
work is just an extension, and it's another buyer walking out the door not saying
Right.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, we work with real estate agents all day long. They want people to walk in the home and say, wow, I can really picture myself here. They don't want to walk in and say, I've got to do that. I got to do that. I got to do that. I don't have time, or I don't have the money or whatever it may be. So you want that wow factor. Not that that's the reason we're talking today, but yeah. Well, listen, Morgan, I really appreciate your time today. You have some great insights into how all this works, and from the community's perspective of the risk that they're taking and the seniors, and you have a really interesting take on this. So I really appreciate you joining us for the session today.
Well, my pleasure, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we'll be collaborating a lot more. So thank you
Absolutely.
again. And
Talk to you
thank
soon.
you to the audience for joining this episode of On the Mark. And we hope to see you again real soon. Take care.